Hello and welcome to Cask Theology, and today we're going to be investigating the theology of Unitology, which is a religion that we find in the Deadspace series of games. As always, we're going to look at 4 different things regarding this religion. We'll look at the history and setting, their core beliefs, their rituals and practices, and then finally, we will have a look at any real-world counterparts and comparisons that we can draw. As always, here's your spoiler warning for the video if you haven't played the games. And if you do enjoy horror games, then I definitely recommend these, as they were some of the highlights of the PS3 and Xbox 360 era. So, without further ado, let's have a look at the history and setting. The story of Unitology begins in the year 2214, when a team of scientists discover something incredible in Mexico. At the centre of the crater where the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs lay, there was an object clearly of extraterrestrial origin and design. The team began to study it, but as time went on, something was becoming very clear. This object, which they dubbed the marker, was having an adverse effect on the mental health of all of the research team, causing them to all slowly go insane. Only one member of the team was strangely able to study this object with only minimal negative effects, and he was a man by the name of Michael Altman. The research team hailed Altman as a prophet, as they now started to view this marker as divine in origin, and saw him as some kind of chosen one. Altman, however, soon came to realise what the marker was actually doing. It was attempting to create horrific, murderous creatures from anything organic that it could find, and most notably, the research crew. After blowing the whistle on the whole affair, and all that had been going on at the research station, Altman was also forced to completely destroy the facility along with the marker, hoping that that would be the end of the matter. However, the marker had infiltrated the minds of some of those outside the project too, and they found Altman, kidnapped him, and then killed him. They then used his death to spin a tale of martyrdom, and the Church of Unitology was born. Skip forward to the year 2508, where the events of Deadspace take place, and Unitology has become the fastest growing religion of all time, with members in all walks of life, and its presence felt everywhere on Earth and beyond. This is reportedly because traditional religions and spirituality had declined over the years, and Unitology was there to take its place. So let's now discuss the core beliefs of Unitology. Unitology is firmly fixed around the marker that we found on Earth, and the attempts to study and understand it. Now, while the concept or idea of a god or a deity is a part of the religion, it is not the object of worship or its focus. The divine is distant, mysterious, and in Unitology it's simply the origin of the marker. The marker is the focus, since it is the line of communication between this divine and the mortal. It was the message that was sent to us. Unity is another theme at the centre of the faith, which ties into the religion's laser focus on eschatology. Much like in any other religion that you could think of, Unitologists look forward to the end times, and a moment known as the convergence, when all souls will become one great entity. Individuality will be lost, and spiritual harmony of all will be achieved. Death is the gateway to unity, and in Unitology, death is not to be feared, but it is to be embraced as part of the natural order, and the way that believers will finally attain the unity they seek. Like the prongs of the marker itself, all life will intertwine in an event that they call the convergence, which will solve all of humanity's issues. However, what most are not aware of is the true purpose of the marker. Known to only a few in the upper echelons of the faith is what the marker really was. It was a device created by eldritch entities who cared little for humans, or indeed any life form. What these beings wanted was to manipulate sentient beings with their markers. The information that was kept within them was not for some spiritual salvation, but it was for a mass massacre of all life on a planet, with the eventual goal of the reproduction of this eldritch race. The convergence was not some spiritual awakening, it was the creation of a new eldritch entity that would call its brethren, who would then join it in consuming all biological matter on a world before seeding another marker to a far-off planet to await the next convergence, and the life cycle continued. The marker's purpose was to create zombified creatures, twisting lifeforms into murderous monsters known as necromorphs. These necromorphs would create dead things, and these dead things would create more dead things until there was enough of them to gather around a marker to begin a convergence event, which was basically creating a new one of these eldritch horrors. Knowing this though, some Unitologists simply saw this as the how of how Unity would finally be achieved. Although the marker was completely destroyed, the research behind it was not. To high-ranking Unitologists, the necromorphs were merely the means to the divine end, no matter how horrific. However, some other founders saw this in a completely different light. The marker was actually able to create life itself, and it could be the key to creating the next step in humanity's evolution. The mental instability that was caused by the marker was due to mankind just not being ready for the information that it held. The necromorphs were imperfect, they were an imperfect creation, and if more markers could be found, then more pieces of this divine puzzle could be put together. So, when another marker was discovered on the remote world of Aegis 7, you can guarantee that the Unitologists used all their influence to gain access to it, since there were some, of course, that believed that with every marker that they found, it would increase the knowledge of how to advance human ascension. It was not going to be for hundreds of years after the founding of Unitology that it was discovered that the marker's purpose was solely to create necromorphs, to create new cosmic horrors, so that their statements about Unity were mostly accurate, just not in the way that they were expecting. On to the rituals and practices then, and for the most part they are very similar to any other religion that you might think of. Preaching about Unitology is a very high priority for all believers, spreading the news of the marker given to them by the prophet Altman. Speaking of Altman, 6 books supposedly written by him, as well as other pro-Unitology books, are often distributed by members of the church. New members will go through a mysterious process which is referred to as indoctrination, or a period of integration with the rest of the church. The church has a strict hierarchy, much like other organised religions, but the difference is where the higher you go, the more power and secrets get revealed to you. Advancements can be made in a few ways, but the most effective way is to donate to the church financially, proving your commitment to it. All members will participate in prayer, both communal and private, and usually led by a clergyman. All of them also practice meditation. The believer will sit in a position that mimics that of the marker, meditating on all of the teachings of the church, often in front of a little shrine to the marker. The presence of a hymn book written by Altman suggests that song is also part of the services. Another key practice that is mentioned, but not described, is soul cleansing, a process that all must go through regularly. Finally, one of the most important events for a Unitologist is their death, and how their body is treated after it. They do not allow the cremation of their bodies, and instead make as much effort as they possibly can to preserve it. The body is to be the vessel for the person's rebirth, so it needs to be looked after. Burial, therefore, is also out of the question, so most bodies are stored on space stations or ships with adequate storage facilities. This focus on death comes into play during the events of the games, as some of the Unitologists will work towards furthering the infestation of necromorphs, seeing them as furthering the marker's plan for humanity. They will even go as far as to commit some ritualistic extreme sacrifices, the aftermath of which can be witnessed when the player traverses Unitology churches and chapels. This focus on the dead and the mysterious initiation ceremonies, the keeping of secrets, and the way that the hierarchy is structured has caused many to distrust Unitology, even though outwardly it portrays itself as a peaceful, non-confrontational religion. So it's time to discuss the real-world comparisons and influences, and straight off the bat, there are 2 that I've got to mention. First off is the very similar sounding Unitarianism. Now, this is a Christian denomination that is non-Trinitarian, that is, that they believe that God is just one being and not a trinity. They sit in the more liberal wing of Christian thought, with their views on things like biblical infallibility, God, and most other core Christian beliefs, and I'm only mentioning them because they've got a very similar sounding name. Their beliefs, however, are vastly different from that of Unitology. Secondly, Unitology could be seen as being influenced by Scientology, and a cursory glance might make you make the same conclusion. Some of the developers of the game actually went out on a limb and said, yes, Scientology was the biggest influence on this creation of this religion, and it's a critique of it. However, other developers said, no, that's not quite the case. It was influenced by many cults and cult-like groups, and it was a critique of those in general. Now, while Scientology could be said to be one of the main influences, I'm kind of on the side of the guys who said that they'd taken inspiration from all manner of places. I mean, sure, Scientologists, yep, they do chuck out some literature, but when I lived in a big city, you'd be getting leaflets and tracts thrust at you from Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, Scientologists, Latter-day Saints, and that was before you'd even got to the section of the street where all the street preachers and the animal rights activists hung out. The preservation of the dead is another thing that is found in various religions and cultures. Ancient Egypt, of course, comes to mind, as do some of the Abrahamic faiths, who don't allow autopsies or cremation, or who mandate a body must be buried whole. Some of this stems from the idea that when the resurrection of the dead finally happens, on that last day, the body that you had is the body that you get back, albeit restored to how it was when you died. The whole unity thing can be found elsewhere, in pretty much all religions if we're honest, but one very strong influence can be seen. Some of the more notorious cults over the years that have inspired some horrific events. This then is the Theology of Unitology. As always, do all the like, share, subscribe-y stuff, grab yourself a drink, and make us whole again.